The morning Jessica Chen received a call from Tesla's acquisition team offering $47 million for her backyard solar operation. She was kneeling in the dusty gravel of her Phoenix trailer park, trying to fix a cracked solar panel with electrical tape and prayer. 3 months earlier, every bank in Arizona had laughed her out of their air-conditioned offices. Now, Silicon Valley's biggest names were fighting over the revolutionary energy system she'd built with spare parts and sheer desperation. Before we dive into this incredible journey, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from around the world. And if this story inspires you, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode will absolutely blow your mind. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the double-wide trailer at exactly 4:47 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 8 months. Jessica Chen silenced it with a practice swipe, careful not to wake her 6-year-old daughter Emma sleeping in the narrow bunk above. The Arizona desert air was already warm despite the early hour, promising another scorching day where temperatures would climb past 115 degrees by noon. Jessica's bare feet touched the worn linoleum floor of the trailer's cramped bedroom, a space barely large enough for the bunk bed and a small dresser they'd salvaged from a yard sale. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez in the adjacent trailer already starting her coffee, the familiar sounds of another single mother beginning another day of struggle in the Sunrise Vista mobile home park. The mirror in their tiny bathroom reflected a woman who looked older than her 32 years. Jessica's black hair, once glossy and professionally styled during her days as a software engineer at Intel, now hung in a simple ponytail that she hadn't had time to wash in 3 days. Dark circles under her brown eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights spent worrying about bills, about Emma's future, about how long their savings would last before they'd have no choice but to move in with her disapproving parents. In San Francisco, she splashed cold water on her face, avoiding her own gaze in the cracked mirror. The woman looking back at her was a far cry from the confident programmer who'd once earned 6 figures developing semiconductor software. That woman had owned a beautiful house in Tempe with a 2-car garage and a backyard pool. That woman had believed the American dream was achievable through hard work and education. That woman had never imagined she'd be living in a trailer park, working 3 part-time jobs just to keep food on the table. The transformation had begun 18 months ago when Intel announced massive layoffs. Despite her stellar performance, reviews, and 8 years of loyalty to the company, Jessica found herself holding a severance package and facing a job market that had no interest in a single mother who needed flexible hours. The tech industry that had once embraced her skills now seemed designed for 20-somethings who could work 18-hour days without worrying about school pickup times or sick children. Her savings had evaporated with shocking speed. First went the house payments, then the car payments, then the health insurance premiums that consumed what little remained of her severance package. The beautiful life she'd built for herself and Emma crumbled like a house of cards in a Phoenix windstorm, leaving them with nothing but a dented Honda Civic and whatever belongings they could fit into a U-Haul trailer. Sunrise Vista mobile home park sat on the outskirts of Phoenix, where the city's sprawl met the unforgiving Sonoran desert. The community consisted of 47 aging trailers, arranged in neat rows along gravel roads that turned to dust clouds whenever the wind picked up. Most residents were retirees living on fixed incomes, immigrant families saving every penny to buy real homes, or people like Jessica who'd fallen from middle-class comfort into the harsh reality of economic instability. Their particular trailer, number 33, was a 1987 Fleetwood that the previous owner had painted an optimistic shade of turquoise that had faded to a sickly green under decades of desert sun. The air conditioning unit wheezed constantly during summer months, driving their electricity, bills to heights that made Jessica's stomach clench with anxiety. The monthly lot rent of $800 was manageable, but barely, especially when combined with utilities, food, and Emma's school expenses. Jessica tiptoed to the kitchen, a galley-style space barely wide enough for one person to stand. Comfortably, the refrigerator hummed loudly, its motor working overtime against the desert heat that penetrated the trailer's thin walls, despite the air conditioning's valiant efforts. She started the coffee maker, a wedding gift from her marriage that had ended 3 years ago when her ex-husband decided that fatherhood and responsibility weren't compatible with his dreams of becoming a professional musician. While the coffee brewed, she checked her phone for messages from the various employers who provided her patchwork income. Mornings were reserved for her data entry job with a medical billing company, work she could do remotely while Emma slept. Afternoons meant driving to the other side of Phoenix to clean office buildings, a job that paid cash and didn't ask questions. About her MIT computer science degree, evenings were spent delivering food for an app-based service, driving through Phoenix's sprawling suburbs while Emma did homework in the back seat. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd spent years developing software that automated business processes, only to find herself doing manual data entry for $9 an hour. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when Emma needed shoes that fit and lunch money for school. Every dollar mattered when you were constantly calculating whether you had enough gas money to make it to the end of the week. Her laptop, a 5-year-old MacBook that had seen better days, sat open on the tiny kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of bills and job applications. The screen showed her current project, entering insurance claims data, with the mindless repetition that left her brain free to wander to bigger problems. Like the electric bill that had arrived yesterday, showing a balance of $347 that was due in 2 weeks. Like Emma's request for money for the school science fair project that all her classmates were building, with expensive materials their parents bought without thinking. Jessica poured coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Best, Mom," a Mother's Day gift from Emma that had become her most treasured possession. The bitter liquid provided the caffeine she'd need to stay alert during the 4 hours of data entry that would earn her $36 before taxes. She'd learned to break down her work into hourly wages because thinking about monthly or yearly income was too depressing to contemplate. Outside the kitchen window, she could see the beginning of what would become her salvation, though she didn't know it yet. 6 weeks ago, frustrated by electric bills that consumed nearly a quarter of their monthly income, Jessica had started researching solar energy options. What she'd discovered was an industry designed for homeowners with good credit and substantial disposable income, not single mothers living paycheck to paycheck in rented trailers. The cheapest solar installation quote she'd received ranged from $15,000 to $30,000, amounts that might as well have been $15 million. For all the accessibility they represented, even the financing options required credit scores and debt-to-income ratios that excluded anyone who'd experienced recent financial hardship. The solar industry's promise of energy independence felt like a cruel joke designed to benefit people who already had enough money to not worry about electric bills. But Jessica's engineering background had taught her to see problems as puzzles waiting to be solved. If she couldn't afford a professional solar installation, maybe she could build something herself. The internet was full of DIY solar tutorials, though most assumed access to tools, workspace, and startup capital that she simply didn't have. Still, the idea took root in her mind like a desert plant, learning to thrive in impossible conditions. Her first attempt had been embarrassingly amateur, using money scraped together from returning aluminum cans and selling textbooks from her Intel days. She'd bought 2 small solar panels from a surplus electronics store and a cheap battery from an auto parts shop. Her goal was modest: generate enough electricity to run a small fan during the hottest part of the day, reducing their dependence on the air conditioning that was destroying their budget. The initial setup had been a disaster. The panels generated power inconsistently, the battery couldn't hold a charge for more than a few hours, and her homemade wiring sparked in ways that terrified her. But each failure taught her something new about voltage, amperage, and energy storage. She spent Emma's bedtime hours watching YouTube videos about electrical engineering, taking notes in a composition notebook like a graduate student cramming for finals. Slowly, painfully, expensively, Jessica began to understand the complexities of solar energy systems. She learned about maximum power point tracking, battery chemistry, and inverter efficiency. She discovered that most commercial solar installations were wildly over-engineered for residential needs, incorporating expensive components that added cost without proportional benefits. More importantly, she began to see opportunities for innovation that the established. The breakthrough came when she realized that her software engineering background gave her advantages that traditional solar installers lacked. While they thought in terms of hardware and installation, she thought in terms of systems optimization and data analysis. What if solar panels could be managed like computer networks, with intelligent software making real-time decisions about energy production and storage? Working in the narrow space behind their trailer, using an old card table as a workbench, Jessica began developing what would eventually become the most efficient residential solar system ever created. She couldn't afford expensive components, so she learned to extract maximum performance from cheap ones. She couldn't hire electricians, so she taught herself electrical work through trial and error that occasionally resulted in blown fuses and worried neighbors. Emma had become her unofficial assistant, holding flashlights and organizing screws, while Jessica worked on their growing collection of solar panels and batteries. The 6-year-old didn't fully understand what her mother was building, but she knew it was important. She'd learned to be quiet during the morning data entry sessions and patient during the long hours when Jessica was focused on electrical diagrams and computer code. Their neighbors in Sunrise Vista had initially viewed Jessica's project with skepticism bordering on concern. Solar panels strapped to sawhorses behind a trailer looked more like a fire hazard than an energy solution. But as weeks passed and Jessica's system began generating serious amounts of electricity, skepticism turned to curiosity. Mrs. Rodriguez asked pointed questions about installation costs. Mr. Kim wondered if something similar might work for his trailer. Even the park manager, initially worried about insurance liability, began asking about permits and safety inspections. The money saved on electricity bills was reinvested immediately into expanding the system. Jessica haunted electronic surplus stores, online auctions and salvage yards, looking for components she could repurpose for solar energy storage. She learned to refurbish old batteries, repair damaged solar panels, and build charge controllers from scratch, using Arduino microprocessors and components that cost pennies compared to commercial equivalents. More importantly, she was developing software that managed the entire system with artificial intelligence principles she'd learned during her Intel days. Her code monitored weather patterns, predicted energy usage, and optimized battery charging cycles with an efficiency that amazed even her. The system learned from daily patterns, adjusting its behavior to maximize energy capture while minimizing waste. By the time winter arrived, Jessica's backyard solar installation was generating more electricity than their trailer could possibly use. The excess energy flowed back into the grid, earning small credits on their monthly electric bill that felt like minor miracles. But more significantly, her system was outperforming commercial installations that had cost 10 times as much to. The build word began to spread beyond Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park. Emma's teacher, mentioned the project to other parents. Mrs. Rodriguez told her son, who worked as an electrician and couldn't believe the efficiency numbers Jessica was achieving. Local news picked up the story of the single mother who'd built a solar powerhouse in her trailer park backyard, though they focused more on human interest than technical innovation. Jessica barely noticed the attention. She was too busy refining her designs, improving her software, and documenting everything in notebooks that would eventually become the foundation for patents worth millions. Her focus remained intensely practical, reducing their monthly expenses while building something that might represent a path toward financial stability. She had no way of knowing that her innovations were being noticed by people far beyond Phoenix, or that her homemade solar farm would soon attract the attention of companies whose names she recognized from tech industry headlines. All she knew was that for the first time since losing her job at Intel, she felt like she was building something meaningful, something that could change their lives and maybe help other families facing similar struggles. The transformation from desperate single mother to renewable energy innovator had been gradual, almost invisible day by day. But standing in her kitchen that morning, watching the sun rise over the desert while her coffee cooled and her laptop waited for another day of data entry, Jessica had no idea that everything was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The crisis began with what Jessica initially dismissed as a routine equipment malfunction. It was a Tuesday morning in late March when Emma burst into the trailer, her backpack bouncing against her small frame as she ran up the makeshift steps Jessica had built from cinder blocks and plywood. The 6-year-old's face was flushed with excitement and concern in equal measure, her dark eyes wide with the urgency that only children could muster over seemingly minor disasters. "Mama, the solar thing is making weird noises," Emma announced breathlessly, dropping her backpack by the door and tugging on Jessica's sleeve. "It sounds like when Mrs. Rodriguez's washing machine broke last month." Jessica looked up from her laptop, where she'd been entering medical billing codes for the past 3 hours, her eyes burning from staring at the screen in the trailer's dim light. The morning data entry shift was supposed to end at noon, giving her just enough time to grab a quick lunch before driving across town to her afternoon cleaning job. But Emma's words sent a spike of anxiety through her chest that had nothing to do with work schedules. "What kind of weird noises, sweetheart?" Jessica asked, saving her work and closing the laptop with practiced efficiency. The solar system had been running smoothly for weeks, generating more electricity than they could use while maintaining the steady, nearly silent hum that had become part of their daily soundtrack. Emma grabbed her mother's hand and pulled her toward the back door of the trailer, like buzzing, but angry buzzing, and sometimes it makes clicking sounds like our old microwave before it stopped working. The moment Jessica stepped outside into the Arizona heat, she knew something was seriously wrong. The familiar background hum of her solar installation had been replaced by an irregular buzzing that spoke of electrical systems under stress. Worse, she could see wisps of what looked like smoke rising from the area where her main battery bank was housed in a plywood enclosure she'd built to protect the equipment from dust and curious neighborhood cats. Her heart hammered as she approached the battery housing, Emma trailing behind with the cautious distance of a child who'd learned to recognize genuine adult concern. The buzzing grew louder as Jessica got closer, accompanied by the acrid smell of overheating electronics that triggered memories of blown circuit boards from her Intel days. She quickly shut down the main power switches, her hands moving with the automatic precision of someone who'd spent months learning every component of the system. The buzzing stopped immediately, but the smell of burned electronics lingered in the desert air like a warning of worse problems to come. "Is it broken, Mama?" Emma asked quietly, her earlier excitement replaced by the kind of worried tone she used when asking about bills or whether they'd have to move again. "I don't know yet, baby," Jessica replied, trying to keep the panic out of her voice while mentally calculating the cost of replacing major system components. "Let me take a look and see what's going on." The diagnosis was worse than she'd feared. When Jessica opened the battery housing, she found a scene of electrical carnage that made her stomach clench with dread. 3 of her refurbished deep-cycle batteries had swollen and cracked, leaking acid that had corroded the connecting cables and damaged the charge controller she'd spent weeks perfecting. The main inverter, a unit she'd bought used and carefully restored, showed scorch marks around its cooling vents that suggested internal damage beyond her ability to repair. The financial implications hit her like a physical blow. The damaged components represented nearly $800 in carefully accumulated equipment, money that had been scraped together over months through sacrificed meals, skipped entertainment, and the kind of penny pinching that turned grocery shopping into mathematical exercises. Worse, without the solar system generating electricity, their monthly electric bill would return to the crushing levels that had motivated the project in the first place. Jessica sat down heavily on an overturned milk crate she used as a work stool, staring at the damaged equipment while Emma hovered nearby with the patient concern of a child who'd learned that adult problems required adult solutions. The irony was devastating. Just when the system had been performing beyond her wildest expectations, just when she'd begun to believe they might achieve some measure of energy independence, everything had collapsed in a cascade of electrical failures that she couldn't afford to fix. The timing couldn't have been worse. Spring in Phoenix meant rising temperatures and climbing electricity bills, as air conditioning became a necessity rather than a luxury. Their ancient window unit would soon be running 12 hours a day, generating electric bills that would consume nearly half their monthly income. Without the solar system's contribution, they'd be back to the impossible mathematics of survival that had defined their first months in the trailer park. Even more crushing was the realization that she'd been so close to something revolutionary. The system's performance data, meticulously recorded in her composition notebooks, showed efficiency levels that surpassed commercial installations costing 10 times as much. Her software innovations had created what amounted to a smart grid in miniature, managing energy production and storage with artificial intelligence that learned and adapted to their daily patterns. But technical brilliance meant nothing without the capital to rebuild and expand. Jessica had exhausted her credit buying the original components, maxed out the few credit cards she'd managed to qualify for, and borrowed against Emma's college savings account to fund the project's development. There was no financial cushion left for repairs, no emergency fund to cover catastrophic equipment failures. She pulled out her phone and called her afternoon cleaning supervisor, explaining that a family emergency would make her late for work. The lie came easily. Everything about their situation felt like an emergency these days. Then she called the food delivery app to cancel her evening driving shift, knowing that the lost income would hurt, but unable to focus on anything except the crisis facing their energy independence project. Emma settled beside her on another milk crate, her small hands folded in her lap with the patience of a child who'd learned that sometimes grown-ups needed quiet time to think through problems. The 6-year-old had witnessed enough of her mother's struggles to understand the difference between minor setbacks and major disasters, and the expression on Jessica's face clearly indicated the latter. "Can you fix it?" Emma asked eventually, her voice small in the desert air that shimmered with heat, even though it was barely past noon. "I don't know, sweetheart," Jessica replied honestly, because she'd learned that Emma responded better to truth than false reassurances. "The parts that broke cost a lot of money, and we don't have extra money right now." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the gravity of a child who'd learned to understand financial constraints through experience rather than explanation. She'd been with Jessica during grocery shopping trips where items were removed from their cart at checkout, had heard the phone calls with utility companies requesting payment extensions, had sensed the stress that accompanied every unexpected expense. "What if we asked people to help?" Emma suggested, with the innocent optimism that hadn't yet been crushed by economic reality. "Like when Mrs. Rodriguez needed money for her operation and everyone in the park gave her some." The suggestion triggered something in Jessica's mind, a connection she hadn't considered before. Mrs. Rodriguez's medical fundraiser had been organized through social media, with neighbors sharing the story, until donations came from strangers across Phoenix who'd been moved by her situation. What if Jessica's solar project could generate similar interest, not through charity, but through the technical innovation it represented? She'd been documenting everything meticulously, partly from her engineering background, and partly because she'd learned to be suspicious of her own memory when stress and exhaustion clouded her thinking. Her notebooks contained detailed performance data, cost analyses, efficiency comparisons, and software code that represented months of unpaid research and development. More importantly, the results spoke for themselves in ways that even skeptics couldn't dismiss. That evening, after Emma was asleep and the trailer park had settled into its nightly quiet, Jessica sat at her kitchen table and began writing. Not the technical documentation that filled her notebooks, but a story that explained what she'd been trying to accomplish and why it mattered. She wrote about single mothers choosing between electricity and groceries, about families trapped in cycles of poverty by utility bills that consumed their income, about the renewable energy revolution that seemed designed to exclude the people who needed it most. She created a simple website using skills she'd learned during her Intel days, uploading photos of her solar installation alongside performance data that demonstrated its effectiveness. She posted before and after utility bills, showing the dramatic reduction in their monthly costs. Most importantly, she shared the software code she'd developed, making her innovations freely available to anyone who wanted to replicate her results. The response began slowly, with a few comments from other single parents facing similar struggles, and some technical questions from DIY solar enthusiasts who were impressed by her efficiency numbers. But within days, the story had been shared dozens of times, then hundreds, as social media users discovered a narrative that combined human interest with technological innovation. Local news stations picked up the story, sending reporters to Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park to interview the single mother who'd built a revolutionary solar system in her backyard. Jessica found herself explaining technical concepts to journalists who struggled to understand the difference between kilowatts and kilowatt hours, but who grasped the human drama of a family fighting for energy independence through ingenuity and determination. The media attention brought unexpected allies. Engineering students from Arizona State University drove out to examine her system, offering volunteer labor to help with repairs. Solar industry professionals reached out with offers of discounted equipment, recognizing innovations that their companies had overlooked. Most surprisingly, venture capital firms began making inquiries about intellectual property rights and commercialization potential. But the most meaningful support came from other families in similar situations. Parents shared their own stories of choosing between air conditioning and school supplies, of utility bills that made rent payments impossible, of children doing homework by flashlight when the electricity was cut off for non-payment. Jessica's project had become a symbol of possibility for people who'd been excluded from the clean energy revolution by economic circumstances beyond their control. The crisis that had threatened to end her solar project was transforming into something much larger and more significant. What had begun as a desperate attempt to reduce their electric bill was evolving into a movement that challenged fundamental assumptions about who could participate in renewable energy development. Jessica found herself at the center of conversations about energy equity, technological innovation, and the democratization of clean power. Emma watched these developments with the fascination of a child seeing her mother transform from someone who worried about bills into someone who appeared on television news shows. The 6-year-old didn't fully understand the technical discussions or policy implications, but she recognized that their backyard project had captured attention far beyond. Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park. As offers of help poured in through social media and email, Jessica realized that the equipment failure had been both disaster and opportunity. The crisis had forced her to share her innovations with a wider audience, revealing the commercial potential of solutions she developed purely for survival. Companies that ignored her calls when she was just another struggling single mother were now competing for her attention as a renewable energy innovator with proven results. The broken batteries and damaged electronics still sat in their plywood housing, waiting for repairs that would determine whether the project could continue. But Jessica no longer felt the crushing weight of facing the crisis alone. Her desperate attempt to reduce their electric bill had accidentally created something with the potential to change how renewable energy systems were designed, built, and financed. She had no way of knowing that the attention her story was generating had already reached executives at companies whose names appeared regularly in tech industry headlines, or that her innovations were being evaluated by teams of engineers who specialized in identifying breakthrough technologies with commercial potential. All she knew was that the crisis that had threatened to destroy their energy independence had somehow opened doors she'd never imagined existed. The question now was whether she could walk through those doors without losing sight of the values and priorities that had motivated her project from the beginning. Jessica's first real test came at 6:30 a.m. on a Thursday morning when a silver Tesla Model S pulled into Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park, looking as out of place as a spaceship in a dusty frontier town. She watched through her kitchen window as a man in his 30s stepped out, adjusting his designer sunglasses and checking his phone before approaching her trailer with the confident stride of someone accustomed to making important decisions. The knock on her door was polite but insistent, cutting through the morning routine she'd established with Emma over months of carefully orchestrated survival. Jessica opened the door to find a tall man with perfectly styled brown hair and a $1,000 suit that had somehow remained wrinkle-free despite the Phoenix heat that was already climbing toward triple digits. "Ms. Chen? I'm David Hoffman from Solar Tech Dynamics," he said, extending a business card printed on heavy stock that felt expensive between her fingers. "We saw your story online and would like to discuss a potential partnership opportunity." Emma peered around her mother's legs with the uninhibited curiosity of a 6-year-old encountering something new and interesting. The man's appearance was so different from their usual visitors, neighbors borrowing tools, delivery drivers, the occasional repair technician, that she studied him like a visitor from another planet. "I'm sorry, but this isn't really a good time," Jessica began, acutely aware that she was wearing yesterday's clothes and hadn't had time to brush her hair. "Emma needs to get ready for school, and I have work starting in 2 hours." Hoffman smiled, with the practiced charm of someone skilled at overcoming initial resistance. "I understand completely. Perhaps we could schedule something more convenient? Our company is very interested in the innovations you've developed. We think there might be significant commercial potential." The phrase commercial potential hit Jessica like cold water. For months, her solar project had been purely about survival, reducing bills, achieving energy independence, creating some small measure of financial stability for herself and Emma. The idea that her desperate improvisation might have value to established companies was both thrilling and terrifying. "What kind of partnership are you talking about?" she asked, stepping onto the small wooden porch that David had built the previous weekend. The morning air carried the scent of desert sage and the distant aroma of Mrs. Rodriguez, making fresh tortillas for her family's breakfast. Hoffman glanced around the trailer park with the carefully neutral expression of someone trying not to appear judgmental while clearly being surprised by his surroundings. "Well, we'd need to evaluate your technology more thoroughly, but based on the performance data you've shared online, we believe you've developed some very promising approaches to residential solar optimization." "Mama, I need help with my backpack," Emma interrupted from inside the trailer, her voice carrying the edge of impatience that meant she was running late for her morning routine. "Just a minute, sweetheart," Jessica called back, then turned to Hoffman. "Look, I appreciate your interest, but I really can't discuss this right now. Could you leave your contact information and maybe we could talk later?" But even as she spoke, Jessica's engineering mind was racing with questions about what Solartech Dynamics wanted and what kind of partnership they might be proposing. Her online research during the previous evening had revealed that the company was a mid-sized solar installation firm with clients throughout the Southwest. They specialized in commercial projects and high-end residential installations, exactly the kind of company that would normally have no interest in a trailer park DIY project. Hoffman handed her another business card along with a folder containing what appeared to be preliminary technical documents. "I'd like to schedule a formal meeting where we can discuss licensing agreements, potential acquisition of your intellectual property, and opportunities for scaling your innovations for mass market deployment." The technical language was familiar from Jessica's Intel days, but the context was entirely new. Licensing agreements and intellectual property acquisition were concepts she associated with established technology companies, not desperate single mothers building solar systems from salvaged components. The suggestion that her innovations could be scaled for mass market deployment felt like validation and threat in equal measure. "I'll need to think about this," she said carefully, accepting the folder while trying to process implications she didn't fully understand, "and I'd probably want to consult with someone who understands these kinds of business arrangements." "Of course," Hoffman agreed. "Take all the time you need, but I should mention that time might be a factor. Your story has generated significant interest in the renewable energy community, and I suspect we won't be the only company reaching out to you." As if summoned by his words, Jessica's phone began ringing with a number she didn't recognize. Then it rang again 30 seconds later with a different unknown number. By the time Hoffman returned to his Tesla and drove away, she'd received 6 calls from area codes spanning California, Texas, and Colorado. Emma emerged from the trailer with her backpack properly organized and her hair brushed into neat pigtails that Jessica had learned to create through YouTube tutorials and patient practice. "Who was that man, Mama?" He looked important. "Someone who's interested in the solar project," Jessica replied, helping Emma into their Honda Civic while her mind struggled to process the morning's developments. "But right now, we need to focus on getting you to school on time." The drive to Emma's elementary school normally provided a few minutes of peaceful routine before Jessica's day exploded into the chaos of multiple jobs and endless responsibilities. But this morning, her phone continued ringing with calls from companies she'd never heard of, each claiming urgent interest in discussing her solar innovations. By the time she returned from school drop-off, 2 more vehicles had appeared in the trailer park's small visitor parking area. One was a white Toyota Prius with California plates and solar company logos covering the rear window. The other was a black BMW sedan that looked like it belonged to someone accustomed to making seven-figure deals. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting on her own front porch, watching the unusual activity with the keen interest of someone who'd lived in the park long enough to notice when things deviated from normal patterns. "Mija, you've got visitors," she called out in accented English. "They've been asking questions about your solar setup." Jessica felt a spike of anxiety as she realized that strangers were investigating her project without her knowledge or permission. The system she'd built was entirely legal and properly permitted, but something about unknown people asking questions made her protective instincts flare. This was their home, their safe space, and these visitors represented intrusions into the carefully constructed stability she'd fought to create. The first visitor introduced himself as Marcus Wong from Pacific Solar Solutions, a company based in San Diego that specialized in innovative residential energy systems. Unlike Hoffman's polished corporate presentation, Wong had the enthusiastic energy of someone genuinely excited by technical innovation. He spent 20 minutes examining Jessica's equipment with the reverence of an engineer encountering elegant solutions to complex problems. "This is remarkable work," Wong said, running his hands over the custom charge controllers Jessica had built using Arduino processors and surplus electronic components. "The efficiency levels you're achieving with consumer-grade hardware are better than what we get with industrial systems costing $50,000. The second visitor was Sarah Mitchell from Renewable Ventures Capital, a venture capital firm that specialized in funding early-stage clean energy companies. Mitchell's approach was entirely different. She seemed less interested in the technical details than in market potential, scalability, and intellectual property protection. Her questions focused on patents, proprietary algorithms, and Jessica's willingness to consider venture capital funding for commercial development. "Have you filed any patent applications for your innovations?" Mitchell asked, reviewing the performance data Jessica had shared online. "Because based on what I'm seeing here, you've developed several potentially patentable improvements to residential solar optimization." Jessica felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the complexity of decisions she was being asked to consider. Patent applications, venture capital funding, licensing agreements. These were concepts from a business world she'd never navigated. Her background was in engineering and software development, not entrepreneurship and intellectual property law. "I honestly hadn't thought about patents," she admitted. "This whole project started as a way to reduce our electric bill. I never intended to create anything with commercial value." Wong laughed with the good-natured enthusiasm of someone who'd seen brilliant engineers overlook the business implications of their innovations. "That's exactly how the best technologies are developed. You solved real problems using elegant engineering without worrying about market constraints or conventional wisdom." But Mitchell's expression suggested more concern than amusement. "The problem is that now that your innovations are publicly documented, you have limited time to file patent applications before the disclosure affects your ability to protect the intellectual property. If other companies reverse engineer your solutions, you could lose the competitive advantage you've created." The conversation was moving into territory where Jessica felt completely out of her depth. Patent law, intellectual property protection, competitive advantage. These were business concerns that required expertise she didn't possess and decisions that could affect Emma's future in ways she couldn't predict. Her phone rang again, this time showing a 512 area code that she recognized as Austin, Texas. When she answered, the caller identified himself as representing Tesla's renewable energy division, requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. The name Tesla sent a jolt of recognition through Jessica's engineering background. This was the company founded by Elon Musk, known for revolutionary approaches to electric vehicles and energy storage. "Could you hold for just a moment?" Jessica asked, putting the call on hold while trying to process the surreal reality that Tesla was calling her trailer in a Phoenix mobile home park. Wong and Mitchell exchanged glances that suggested they understood the significance of Tesla's interest. Pacific Solar Solutions and Renewable Ventures Capital were respected companies within the solar industry, but Tesla represented an entirely different level of resources, market influence, and technological sophistication. "You should probably take that call," Mitchell advised quietly. "Tesla doesn't reach out to individuals unless they've identified something genuinely revolutionary." Jessica returned to the phone call with hands that were actually trembling. The Tesla representative, who introduced himself as Dr. James Kumar from their Advanced Energy Systems division, explained that they'd been monitoring social media discussions about innovative solar projects and had identified her work as potentially transformative for residential energy storage. "Ms. Chen, would it be possible to schedule a site visit where our technical team could evaluate your system in person?" Dr. Kumar asked. "We're particularly interested in the artificial intelligence algorithms you've developed for optimizing energy storage and distribution." The request felt simultaneously validating and terrifying. Tesla's interest confirmed that her innovations had genuine technical merit, but it also raised stakes she wasn't prepared to handle. Companies like Tesla didn't express interest in projects unless they saw potential for significant commercial development or acquisition. "I'd be happy to discuss that," Jessica replied carefully, "but I should probably mention that I've had several companies contact me today. I'm not sure what the appropriate process is for handling multiple interested parties." Dr. Kumar's response suggested he'd expected this development. "That's completely understandable. Innovation like yours tends to generate significant interest once it becomes visible. I'd recommend consulting with Intellectual Property Counsel before proceeding with any formal agreements." After ending the call, Jessica found herself staring at her backyard solar installation with entirely new eyes. The collection of refurbished panels, salvaged batteries, and custom electronics that had begun as a desperate attempt to reduce their electric bill was apparently sophisticated enough to attract attention from some of the renewable energy industry's most influential companies. Wong had spent the conversation photographing various components with obvious fascination, asking detailed questions about her software algorithms and optimization strategies. Mitchell had been taking notes about market potential and scalability challenges, clearly evaluating Jessica's innovations through the lens of investment opportunity. "What happens next?" Jessica asked, feeling overwhelmed by the rapid transformation of their situation. "That depends on what you want to accomplish," Mitchell replied. "You could license your technology to existing companies, start your own business with venture capital funding, or potentially sell your innovations outright to a major player like Tesla." Each option represented a different path forward, with implications Jessica wasn't qualified to evaluate on her own. She needed advice from people who understood technology commercialization, intellectual property law, and the renewable energy industry's competitive landscape. But first, she needed to pick up Emma from school and maintain some semblance of normal routine while their world transformed around them. The cultural and institutional barriers that Jessica faced became brutally apparent during her first formal meeting with Southwestern Regional Bank, the largest financial institution in Phoenix. She had scheduled the appointment after Dr. Kumar from Tesla suggested that any serious business development would require establishing proper banking relationships and potential lines of credit for intellectual property protection and patent filing costs. The bank's downtown Phoenix headquarters occupied 37 floors of gleaming glass and steel that reflected the desert sun like a monument to financial power. Jessica had spent an hour getting ready, borrowing a business suit from Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, who worked as a real estate agent, practicing her presentation in the trailer park's community center mirror, and rehearsing answers to questions she anticipated about her technology and business plans. The contrast between her carefully prepared appearance and the bank's opulent lobby was immediately apparent. Marble floors, original artwork, and the subtle hum of central air conditioning set at temperatures that required the jacket she couldn't afford created an atmosphere designed to intimidate anyone who didn't belong to the world of serious money. Jessica's borrowed heels clicked nervously across the polished stone as she approached the reception desk. "I have an appointment with Thomas Bradley in commercial lending," she told the receptionist, a woman whose manicured nails and designer clothing probably cost more than Jessica's monthly income. The receptionist's smile was professionally polite, but carried undertones of skepticism as she took in Jessica's obviously borrowed outfit and nervous demeanor. "Mr. Bradley will be with you shortly. Please have a seat in our client waiting area." The waiting area featured leather furniture that was more expensive than anything Jessica had ever owned, along with financial magazines and annual reports from Fortune 500 companies. She tried to project confidence while reviewing her presentation materials, but everything about the environment emphasized the distance between her trailer park reality and the world of corporate finance. When Thomas Bradley finally appeared, Jessica understood immediately that the meeting would be an uphill battle. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of tailored suit that communicated authority without appearing ostentatious. His handshake was firm but brief, and his expression suggested polite skepticism about whatever proposition had brought her to his office. "Miss Chen, I understand you're interested in discussing financing options for a technology venture," Bradley said, as he led her to a conference room with windows overlooking Phoenix's sprawling metropolitan area. "Could you give me an overview of your business concept and financing requirements?" Jessica launched into the presentation she'd rehearsed, explaining her solar innovations, the performance data that had attracted corporate interest, and her need for capital to file patent applications and potentially scale her technology for commercial development. She showed him the efficiency comparisons, the cost analyses, and the documentation of interest from companies including Tesla. Bradley listened with the patient attention of someone trained to evaluate business proposals, occasionally asking questions about market size, competitive landscape, and revenue projections. But as Jessica's presentation continued, she began to sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the dynamic between them. "These are interesting technical achievements," Bradley said when she finished, "but I'm having difficulty understanding the business model. Are you proposing to manufacture solar equipment, provide installation services, license technology to existing companies?" "I'm not entirely sure yet," Jessica admitted honestly. "That's partly why I need advice from financial professionals about the best path forward. Several companies have expressed interest in licensing or acquiring my innovations, but I don't have experience with those kinds of transactions." Bradley's expression shifted subtly, moving from polite attention to something approaching condescension. "Ms. Chen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but what you're describing sounds more like a hobby project than a scalable business opportunity. Commercial lending requires clear revenue projections, established market demand, and management teams with relevant industry experience." The dismissal stung more than Jessica had expected. She'd come to the meeting hoping for guidance and potential financial partnership, but Bradley's response suggested that her innovations were being viewed as amateur dabbling rather than serious technological development. "But companies like Tesla and Pacific Solar Solutions have expressed genuine interest," she protested. "They wouldn't be reaching out if my technology didn't have commercial value." Large companies often investigate interesting technologies without any intention of actually acquiring them, Bradley replied, with the tone of someone explaining obvious facts to a naive amateur. They might be gathering competitive intelligence or simply due diligence on potential intellectual property conflicts. Jessica felt heat rising in her cheeks as she realized that Bradley was systematically undermining every aspect of her presentation. Her technical achievements were dismissed as hobby projects. Corporate interest was reframed as routine industrial espionage. Her innovations were characterized as curiosities rather than breakthrough technologies. What would it take for you to consider this a legitimate business opportunity? She asked, trying to maintain professional composure while anger built in her chest. Bradley consulted the tablet he'd been using to take notes during her presentation. Typically, we'd want to see established revenue streams, audited financial statements for at least 2 years, management teams with relevant industry experience, and market analyses demonstrating scalable demand for the proposed products or services. Each requirement he listed represented obstacles that were obviously impossible for someone in Jessica's situation to meet. Established revenue streams required existing business operations. Audited financial statements demanded resources she couldn't afford. Management teams with industry experience excluded anyone who hadn't already succeeded in corporate environments. Market analyses required professional consulting services that cost more than her annual income. So you're saying that innovative technology developed by individuals has no value unless it's backed by existing corporate infrastructure? Jessica asked, her frustration beginning to show despite her efforts to remain professional. I'm saying that commercial lending requires risk assessment based on quantifiable business fundamentals, Bradley replied smoothly. Personal innovation, regardless of its technical merit, doesn't translate automatically into viable commercial enterprises. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but Jessica knew it was over. Bradley's questions became increasingly focused on her personal financial history, credit score, and debt-to-income ratios, rather than the technology that had brought her to his office. When he learned that she lived in a mobile home park and worked multiple part-time jobs, his demeanor shifted from skeptical to openly dismissive. Ms. Chen, I'd recommend that you consider approaching angel investors or crowdfunding platforms that specialize in early-stage technology development, Bradley concluded. Traditional commercial lending probably isn't the appropriate financing vehicle for your situation. Jessica left the bank feeling humiliated and angry, her borrowed heels clicking across the marble lobby, while her mind burned with frustration at the systematic barriers that excluded people like her from accessing traditional financial resources. The message had been clear. Innovative technology meant nothing without existing wealth, corporate credentials, and social connections that opened doors she couldn't even identify. The drive back to Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park took her through Phoenix neighborhoods that illustrated the economic stratification Bradley had reinforced with corporate politeness. Gleaming office complexes gave way to middle-class suburbs, which transitioned to working-class areas, and finally to the collection of trailer parks and low-income housing that surrounded the city's periphery like rings of economic exclusion. Jessica's phone had been ringing throughout the drive with calls from additional companies expressing interest in her solar innovations. But Bradley's dismissal had planted seeds of doubt about whether corporate interest represented genuine opportunity or merely industrial curiosity about amateur achievements. Emma was waiting at their trailer with Mrs. Rodriguez, who had agreed to watch her during Jessica's bank appointment. The 6-year-old took one look at her mother's expression and immediately understood that the meeting hadn't gone well. "Did the bank people say no, Mama?" Emma asked, with the directness that children used to cut through adult complications. "They said we don't have the right kind of qualifications," Jessica replied, hanging the borrowed jacket carefully on a hanger while trying to process the morning's disappointment. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had experienced her own share of financial institution rejections during decades of working-class life, shook her head with familiar disgust. Banks only want to lend money to people who already have money. They don't understand that sometimes the best ideas come from people who have to be creative because they don't have other choices. The observation resonated with Jessica's growing frustration about the renewable energy industry's structural barriers. The most innovative solutions often emerged from people facing real-world constraints that forced creative problem-solving. But the financial and institutional systems designed to support innovation were optimized for people who'd never experienced those constraints. Her laptop showed 17 new emails from companies requesting meetings, technology demonstrations, or preliminary discussions about licensing agreements. But Bradley's skepticism had raised questions about how to distinguish genuine opportunities from industrial intelligence gathering or routine due diligence exercises. The most intriguing message came from Dr. Kumar at Tesla, who had sent detailed, technical questions about her artificial intelligence algorithms and energy optimization strategies. His inquiries demonstrated sophisticated understanding of her innovations and suggested that Tesla's interest went beyond casual curiosity. More importantly, his questions indicated that her technology addressed specific challenges that Tesla was facing in their residential energy storage products. But even Tesla's apparent serious interest raised complicated questions about how to proceed without the kind of legal and financial advice that Jessica couldn't afford. Patent attorneys charged hundreds of dollars per hour for consultations. Business development consultants required retainer fees that exceeded her monthly income. Intellectual property protection demanded upfront investments that were impossible. Without access to capital that banks like Southwestern Regional refused to provide. The circular logic was maddening. She needed professional advice to evaluate corporate opportunities, but she couldn't afford professional advice without first monetizing her innovations, which required navigating corporate negotiations that she wasn't qualified to handle alone. Emma had settled at the kitchen table with her homework, occasionally glancing at her mother with the concerned attention of a child who'd learned to monitor adult stress levels as a survival mechanism. The 6-year-old understood that the bank meeting had been important and that its failure created problems she couldn't help solve. "Mama, maybe we could ask the Tesla people to help us understand what we're supposed to do," Emma suggested, with the logical thinking that sometimes cut through adult complications with startling clarity. The suggestion was actually brilliant in its simplicity. If Tesla was genuinely interested in her technology, they would have experienced legal and business development teams who understood how to structure appropriate agreements. Rather than navigating the process alone, she could potentially leverage their expertise while maintaining control over her innovations. Jessica's phone rang again, this time showing a local Phoenix number she didn't recognize. When she answered, the caller identified herself as Maria Santos from Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office. Dr. Santos explained that they'd been following online discussions about Jessica's solar innovations and wanted to offer assistance with intellectual property protection and business development. "Ms. Chen, we work with inventors and entrepreneurs who have developed promising technologies but need support navigating the commercialization process," Dr. Santos explained. "Our services include patent application assistance, business development counseling, and connections with appropriate legal and financial resources." The offer felt like a lifeline after the morning's bank rejection. Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office was specifically designed to help innovators like Jessica bridge the gap between technical achievement and commercial success. Their services were subsidized by state funding and federal grants, making them accessible to people who couldn't afford private consulting fees. What would that process involve? Jessica asked, already feeling more hopeful than she had since. Leaving Bradley's dismissive office, we'd start with a comprehensive evaluation of your technology to identify patentable innovations and assess commercial potential, Dr. Santos replied. Then we'd work with you to develop a business strategy that aligns with your goals and resources while protecting your intellectual property rights. The conversation continued for 30 minutes, covering patent protection timelines, university partnership options, and strategies for negotiating with corporate licensees. Dr. Santos understood the challenges facing individual inventors and had experience helping people navigate the complex intersection of innovation, intellectual property law, and business development. More importantly, she seemed to understand that Jessica's innovations had genuine technical merit rather than dismissing them as amateur hobby projects. Her questions focused on performance data, scalability potential, and market applications rather than Jessica's personal financial history or corporate credentials. By the time Emma finished her homework and started helping prepare dinner, Jessica felt like she'd found a path forward that didn't require existing wealth or corporate connections. Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office offered expertise and resources that could level the playing field between her trailer park innovations and corporate acquisition teams with unlimited legal budgets. The day that had begun with institutional rejection was ending with the possibility of partnerships that could provide professional support while allowing her to maintain control over technologies she'd developed through necessity and determination. But first, she needed to return Mrs. Rodriguez's borrowed suit and figure out what to wear to meetings with university technology transfer specialists who might finally understand the value of innovation born from real-world constraints. The breakthrough moment came at 2:17 p.m. on a scorching Thursday afternoon when Jessica's phone displayed an incoming call from a 650 area code she'd learned to associate with Silicon Valley power brokers. She was kneeling beside her rebuilt solar array, adjusting voltage regulators that had been donated by sympathetic engineers from 3 different companies, when Dr. Elena Vasquez from Tesla's Advanced Energy Division delivered news that would change everything. Ms. Chen, I'm calling to inform you that our technical evaluation team has completed their analysis of your energy management algorithms, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying the measured excitement of someone trying to remain professional. While discussing something genuinely revolutionary, we'd like to schedule an immediate in-person meeting to discuss acquisition terms for your intellectual property. Jessica sat back on her heels in the desert dust, trying to process words that seemed too significant for her backyard reality. Acquisition terms, intellectual property. The clinical language of corporate deals was colliding with her world of salvage components and hand-built electronics in ways that made her head spin. Could you give me some idea of what you're proposing? She asked, wiping sweat from her forehead while Emma played nearby with a collection of electronic components that had become her favorite toys. I'd prefer to discuss specifics in person, but I can tell you that Tesla is prepared to make a substantial offer for exclusive licensing rights to your optimization software, along with a development contract that would allow you to continue refining the technology under our guidance. The phrase substantial offer hung in the Arizona heat like a mirage that might disappear if examined too closely. Jessica had learned to be suspicious of promises that seemed too good to be true, especially from corporate representatives who lived in a world where substantial meant something entirely different than it did in trailer parks. But Dr. Vasquez's next words eliminated any possibility of dismissing the call as routine corporate politeness. Ms. Chen, Tesla is prepared to discuss an initial licensing payment in the range of $12 to $15 million with additional development fees and royalty agreements that could significantly exceed that amount. Jessica's vision actually blurred for a moment as her brain struggled to process numbers that had no connection to her lived experience. $12 to $15 million represented more money than she'd earn in multiple lifetimes of data entry, work, cleaning office buildings, and delivering food for app-based services. It was enough money to transform not just her life and Emma's future, but the lives of everyone in Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park. "I think I need to sit down," Jessica managed, though she was already sitting in the gravel beside her solar installation. Dr. Vasquez's laugh carried genuine warmth rather than corporate calculation. "That's a completely normal reaction. Revolutionary. Technology often generates life-changing opportunities for the people who develop it. Would it be possible for our team to visit your installation tomorrow? We're particularly interested in seeing your optimization algorithms in action." The idea of Tesla executives visiting Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park to examine her backyard solar array struck Jessica as surreal beyond imagination. Corporate representatives who normally dealt with billion-dollar infrastructure projects would be crawling around her trailer park installation, analyzing innovations she'd developed out of desperation, using salvaged components and creative problem-solving. "Of course, but I should probably mention that my setup isn't exactly what you'd call professional," Jessica said, looking around at the collection of refurbished panels, rebuilt batteries, and custom electronics that had grown organically across the small space behind their trailer. "Ms. Chen, professional setups don't typically achieve the efficiency levels you've documented," Dr. Vasquez replied. "We're interested in your innovations precisely because they represent breakthrough thinking that conventional approaches haven't produced." After ending the call, Jessica remained sitting in the desert heat, staring at her phone as if it might provide additional confirmation that the conversation had actually occurred. Emma approached, with the careful attention she'd learned to use when adult conversation suggested important developments. "Was that about the solar project, Mama?" Emma asked, settling beside her mother in the gravel with the casual comfort of a child who'd spent months playing around electrical equipment. "Yes, sweetheart. Tesla wants to buy the software I wrote to make our solar panels work better." Jessica's explanation felt inadequate for describing transactions involving millions of dollars and corporate acquisition agreements, but Emma nodded, with the acceptance of a 6-year-old who'd grown accustomed to her mother accomplishing remarkable things. "Does that mean we won't have to worry about money anymore?" Emma asked with the direct honesty that cut through adult complications to essential truths. Jessica pulled her daughter closer, breathing in the scent of desert dust and childhood shampoo while trying to comprehend the transformation that Tesla's offer represented. "I think it might mean exactly that, baby, but we need to be very careful about how we handle this opportunity." The afternoon brought a cascade of additional calls as word of Tesla's interest spread through industry networks with the speed of Silicon Valley gossip. Companies that had been casually interested in Jessica's innovations suddenly discovered urgent needs for immediate meetings and competitive acquisition discussions. Pacific Solar Solutions called with an offer to triple their original licensing proposal. Renewable Ventures Capital pitched comprehensive funding packages that would allow Jessica to build her own company rather than licensing technology to competitors. A consortium of German renewable energy companies proposed international licensing agreements that could generate royalty payments for decades. Each conversation added layers of complexity that Jessica felt increasingly unqualified to navigate alone. Corporate attorneys, licensing specialists, and business development executives used technical language that required translation into terms she could understand. Patent protection strategies, intellectual property portfolios, and competitive exclusivity clauses represented concepts from a business world she'd never encountered. But the most significant call came from Dr. Maria Santos at Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office, who had been monitoring the sudden corporate interest in Jessica's innovations with the protective instincts of someone dedicated to ensuring that individual inventors weren't exploited by predatory business practices. "Jessica, I've been hearing rumors about major acquisition offers, and I wanted to check in with you about legal representation," Dr. Santos said. "Corporate deals of this magnitude require sophisticated legal advice that individual inventors often can't afford." The observation highlighted Jessica's most pressing vulnerability. Tesla's $12 to $15 million offer was meaningless without proper legal guidance to ensure that licensing agreements protected her interests while maximizing long-term value. But patent attorneys and technology licensing specialists charged hourly rates that could consume thousands of dollars before basic agreements were even drafted. "I've been thinking about that problem," Jessica admitted. "I don't have money for the kind of legal advice these deals require, but I can't afford to sign agreements without proper representation." Dr. Santos had apparently anticipated this exact situation. The university has relationships with intellectual property attorneys who work on contingency arrangements for promising technologies. They take percentage fees from successful deals rather than requiring upfront payments. The solution felt like another lifeline thrown to someone drowning in circumstances beyond her experience or control. Contingency-based legal representation would allow her to access sophisticated advice without depleting savings that barely existed. More importantly, attorneys working on percentage arrangements would be motivated to maximize deal value rather than simply completing transactions quickly. "Could you help me connect with appropriate legal resources?" Jessica asked, already feeling relief at the prospect of professional guidance. "I'll make some calls this afternoon and have recommendations for you by tomorrow morning," Dr. Santos promised. These are attorneys who specialize in technology licensing and have experience protecting individual inventors in negotiations with major corporations. Emma had been listening to her mother's phone conversations with the fascination of a child, witnessing adult activities that seemed important but remained largely incomprehensible. The 6-year-old understood that people wanted to buy something her mother had created, and that the amounts being discussed were larger than any numbers. In her experience, "Mama, if Tesla gives us lots of money, can we get a house with a real yard where I can have a swing set?" Emma asked during a brief pause between corporate calls. The question struck Jessica with unexpected emotion as she realized that Emma's dreams were still small enough to be easily fulfilled by the opportunities they were facing. A house with a yard and a swing set represented modest suburban comfort that would be completely achievable with Tesla's proposed licensing payments. "We can get a house with the biggest yard in Arizona if you want," Jessica replied, pulling Emma into a hug that lasted until the phone rang again with another corporate acquisition proposal. The evening brought unexpected visitors as news of Tesla's interest attracted attention from local media outlets that had been following Jessica's story since her original social media posts about DIY solar innovation. A reporter from Phoenix Business Journal arrived with a photographer, requesting interviews about the corporate deals that were transforming a trailer park solar project into a multi-million-dollar technology acquisition. "Ms. Chen, could you walk us through how your backyard experiment attracted attention from companies like Tesla?" the reporter asked, setting up recording equipment while the photographer captured images of Jessica's installation against the backdrop of Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park. Jessica found herself explaining technical concepts to journalists who struggled with engineering terminology but grasped the human drama of a single mother's innovations attracting corporate acquisition. offers worth more than most people earned in their entire careers. The story had all the elements that media loved: individual creativity, overcoming institutional barriers, technological innovation emerging from economic necessity, and David versus Goliath dynamics between trailer park inventors and Silicon Valley corporations. But the media attention also highlighted the surreal disconnect between Jessica's daily reality and the business world that was suddenly competing for her innovations. Reporters photographed her explaining voltage optimization algorithms while standing beside a collection of salvaged equipment that looked more like an electronics graveyard than a revolutionary energy management system. Mrs. Rodriguez watched the media circus from her own front porch, shaking her head with the amazement of someone who'd lived in Sunrise Vista long enough to see many stories of struggle, but few examples of dramatic success. Mija, 3 months ago you were worried about paying the electric bill. Now you're going to be on the business news talking about million-dollar deals. The observation captured the dizzying speed of Jessica's transformation from desperate single mother to sought-after technology innovator. But it also reminded her that corporate offers represented opportunities that needed to be evaluated carefully rather than accepted immediately based on their magnitude. Emma fell asleep that night to the sounds of her mother reviewing technical documents and legal terminology on her laptop, preparing for negotiations that would determine their family's financial future. The 6-year-old's dreams probably included swing sets and big yards, simple pleasures that Tesla's millions could provide easily, but Jessica's dreams had become more complex, involving patent protection strategies, licensing exclusivity terms, and development contracts that could influence the renewable energy industry's evolution for decades. Her backyard solar project had accidentally positioned her at the center of technological and business forces that she was still learning to understand. The question was whether she could navigate corporate acquisition processes successfully enough to transform her innovations into long-term security for Emma, while maintaining the values and priorities that had motivated her work from the beginning. The answer would depend largely on the legal guidance that Dr. Santos was arranging, and on Jessica's ability to remember that corporate millions were less important than ensuring that her technology continued serving families who faced the same energy cost struggles that had started her entire journey. Tomorrow would bring Tesla executives to Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park, where they would examine innovations born from necessity and refined through months of patient experimentation. The surreal collision between Silicon Valley acquisition teams and trailer park engineering would determine whether Jessica's desperate attempt to reduce their electric bill had actually created something capable of changing how residential energy systems worked throughout the world. The confrontation Jessica had been dreading arrived at 9:15 a.m. on Friday morning in the form of 3 black SUVs pulling into Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park with the coordinated precision of a federal operation. She watched through her kitchen window as men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles, their movements suggesting law enforcement or regulatory authority rather than corporate business development. The lead figure was a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of rigid posture that spoke of military or government background. He approached Jessica's trailer with purposeful strides, while his associates spread out across the park's small common area, their presence immediately attracting worried attention from neighbors who'd learned to be suspicious of official-looking visitors. Ms. Chen, I'm Agent Robert Morrison from the Department of Energy's Technology Security Division, the man announced when Jessica opened her door, presenting credentials that looked authentically federal. We need to discuss some concerns about your recent technology development activities. Emma peered around her mother's legs with the wide-eyed curiosity of a child encountering something new and potentially threatening. The 6-year-old had learned to read adult tension levels as a survival mechanism, and Agent Morrison's presence radiated the kind of authority that made neighbors disappear behind closed doors. "What kind of concerns?" Jessica asked, stepping onto her small porch while keeping Emma close beside her. "My solar installation is completely legal and properly permitted with all local authorities." Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral, but his tone carried undertones of suspicion that made Jessica's stomach clench with anxiety. "We're not questioning the legality of your installation, Ms. Chen. Our concerns relate to the potential export of sensitive energy management technologies to foreign entities without proper government oversight." The accusation hit Jessica like cold water, transforming what she'd understood as legitimate business development into something that sounded dangerously close to allegations of improper technology transfer or even espionage. Her innovations had attracted corporate interest from companies around the world, but she'd never considered that international licensing discussions might trigger federal security concerns. "I haven't exported anything to anyone," she replied, carefully, trying to maintain composure while her mind raced through every conversation she'd had with corporate representatives. "Several companies have expressed interest in licensing my software, but I haven't signed any agreements or shared proprietary information with foreign entities." Morrison consulted a tablet he'd been carrying, reading from what appeared to be detailed surveillance reports about Jessica's recent activities. "Our information indicates that you've had contact with representatives from German renewable energy consortiums, Chinese solar manufacturing companies, and European venture capital firms specializing in clean energy technologies." Each item he listed was technically accurate, but presented in ways that made legitimate business discussions sound like suspicious international conspiracies. Jessica had indeed spoken with representatives from German companies, but those conversations had been initial inquiries about potential licensing opportunities, not detailed technology transfers. "Those were preliminary business discussions," she explained, feeling increasingly defensive despite having done nothing wrong. "I haven't shared technical specifications or proprietary software with anyone outside the United States." One of Morrison's associates, a younger woman with the intense focus of someone accustomed to conducting investigations, stepped forward with additional questions that revealed the scope of federal interest in Jessica's activities. "Ms. Chen, could you describe the artificial intelligence algorithms you've developed for energy optimization? Specifically, we're interested in their potential applications for grid-scale power management." The question highlighted something Jessica hadn't fully considered. Her software innovations had applications beyond residential solar systems that could potentially affect national energy infrastructure security. The optimization algorithms she'd developed to manage her trailer park installation could theoretically be scaled up to manage regional power grids or coordinated across multiple installations to create distributed energy networks. "I developed the software specifically for residential energy storage optimization," Jessica replied honestly. "I haven't considered large-scale applications, and I certainly haven't discussed grid infrastructure with any foreign representatives." Morrison's expression suggested skepticism about her claims of limited scope and innocent intentions. "Ms. Chen, the algorithms you've published online demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything currently deployed in commercial residential systems. Technologies with that level of sophistication typically originate from government research programs or major corporate development initiatives." The implication was clear. Morrison found it suspicious that breakthrough energy management technology had emerged from a trailer park rather than from established institutional sources. Jessica's innovations were being viewed with suspicion precisely because they represented unexpected achievement by someone outside conventional development channels. I'm a software engineer with 8 years of experience developing optimization algorithms for Intel, Jessica said, allowing frustration to show in her voice. The fact that I'm currently living in a mobile home park doesn't mean I'm incapable of creating sophisticated software. Emma had been listening to the adult conversation with growing distress, her young mind struggling to understand why men with badges were asking her mother questions in hostile tones. The 6-year-old understood that these visitors were different from the corporate representatives who'd been arriving with business proposals and acquisition offers. "Mama, are we in trouble?" Emma asked quietly, tugging on Jessica's sleeve with the worried attention of a child who'd learned that official visits often brought bad news. "No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble," Jessica replied, though Morrison's continued presence suggested that the situation was more complicated than simple reassurance could address. "These men just want to understand what we've been building in our backyard." Morrison's investigation team had apparently done extensive background research on Jessica's technical capabilities, corporate contacts, and recent media appearances. They knew about Tesla's acquisition offers, the international licensing inquiries, and the patent applications that Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office was helping her prepare. "Ms. Chen, we'd like to conduct a technical review of your installation and software systems," Morrison announced, in a tone that suggested the request was actually a requirement. "This is a routine security assessment to ensure that sensitive technologies aren't being transferred inappropriately to foreign entities." The demand felt like a violation of privacy and intellectual property rights, but Jessica understood that refusing cooperation with federal investigators would only escalate suspicions about her activities. She also realized that Morrison's team had authority to examine her technology whether she consented or not. "What exactly are you looking for?" she asked, trying to understand the scope of their investigation while protecting her legitimate business interests. "We need to verify that your energy management algorithms don't incorporate classified technologies or methodologies that could compromise national security if shared with foreign competitors," Morrison explained. "We also want to ensure that your corporate discussions haven't involved inappropriate disclosure of sensitive capabilities." Jessica's phone had been ringing continuously throughout the federal investigation, with calls from Tesla, Pacific Solar Solutions, and the patent attorneys that Dr. Santos had connected her with. She'd been letting the calls go to voicemail, but Morrison's presence was clearly affecting her ability to conduct normal business development activities. "Agent Morrison, I need to mention that I have corporate meetings scheduled for this afternoon," she said carefully. "Tesla's technical team is supposed to conduct their final evaluation of my system before finalizing acquisition terms." Morrison's expression sharpened with obvious interest at the mention of Tesla's involvement. "Ms. Chen, we'll need you to postpone any technology demonstrations or information sharing until our security review is complete. Corporate discussions involving sensitive technologies require federal oversight to ensure compliance with export control regulations." The order effectively froze Jessica's business development activities at the worst possible moment. Tesla's acquisition offer was time-sensitive, with competing companies preparing alternative proposals that could be withdrawn if negotiations were delayed indefinitely. Morrison's investigation threatened to derail opportunities that represented life-changing financial security for Jessica and Emma, but resistance to federal authority carried risks that could extend far beyond delayed business deals. If Morrison's team concluded that Jessica had violated export control regulations or technology transfer restrictions, she could face criminal charges that would destroy not just her innovations, but her ability to provide for Emma. Mrs. Rodriguez had been watching the federal investigation from her front porch with the concerned attention of someone who'd lived through enough government interactions to recognize serious trouble. She approached Jessica's trailer with the protective instincts of a surrogate grandmother who'd watched Emma play in the park's common areas for months. "Mija, do you need help with anything?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked in Spanish-accented English. Her question directed to Jessica, but her suspicious gaze fixed on Morrison and his associates. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez, but I think we'll be fine," Jessica replied, though she appreciated the moral support from someone who understood the intimidation tactics that federal investigators used to pressure people into compliance. Morrison's technical specialist, a man who'd been examining Jessica's solar installation with obvious expertise, returned from his equipment review with findings that appeared to surprise even the investigation team. Agent Morrison, this installation demonstrates efficiency, levels that exceed anything in our technology assessment database. The optimization algorithms are genuinely revolutionary. The acknowledgement of her technical achievements felt like validation, but Jessica realized that exceptional performance was actually increasing federal suspicions about her work. Revolutionary technologies attracted government attention precisely because they represented capabilities that could affect national security if transferred to foreign competitors. "Ms. Chen, given the sophisticated nature of your innovations, we're going to need to conduct extended technical interviews with our energy security specialists," Morrison announced. This process could take several days to complete. Emma had been growing increasingly agitated during the federal investigation, her child's intuition recognizing that these visitors represented threats to the stability she'd finally found in their trailer park home. The 6-year-old understood that men with badges could make her mother go away, just like they'd taken away other parents in the immigrant families that lived throughout Sunrise Vista. "How long will Mama have to talk to you?" Emma asked Morrison directly, her small voice carrying the determined protectiveness of a child defending her only family. Morrison's expression softened slightly when addressing Emma, suggesting that he had children of his own and understood the anxiety that federal investigations created for families. "We just need to make sure your mother's inventions are safe and won't be used by people who might want to hurt our country." The explanation was obviously simplified for a 6-year-old's understanding, but it highlighted the national security framework that was driving federal interest in Jessica's innovations. Her backyard solar project had accidentally created technologies with implications that extended far beyond residential energy bills. Jessica's laptop displayed 17 missed calls from corporate representatives who were undoubtedly wondering why their acquisition negotiations had suddenly been placed on indefinite hold. Tesla's Dr. Vasquez had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails requesting confirmation of their scheduled technical evaluation. "Agent Morrison, I understand your security concerns, but these delays are affecting legitimate business opportunities that could provide financial security for my daughter," Jessica said, allowing desperation to show in her voice. "Is there any way to expedite your review process?" Morrison's response suggested that federal timelines operated according to bureaucratic schedules rather than corporate acquisition deadlines. "National security assessments can't be rushed, Ms. Chen. We'll complete our review as quickly as possible, while ensuring thorough evaluation of all potential risks." The investigation was transforming Jessica's breakthrough moment into a nightmare of federal scrutiny that threatened to destroy the opportunities she'd worked months to create. Her innovations were being caught between corporate acquisition teams that operated on Silicon Valley timelines and government investigators who followed federal procedures that could take weeks or months to complete. Emma settled beside her mother on the trailer's small porch, watching federal agents examine their solar installation with the resigned patience of a child who'd learned that adult problems required adult solutions. The 6-year-old's dreams of houses with big yards and swing sets were being postponed by men who saw national security threats in technologies that had been developed to reduce electric bills. The morning that should have brought Tesla's final acquisition offer was instead bringing federal investigation procedures that could delay or destroy the life-changing opportunities that Jessica's innovations had created. The turning point came when Dr. Elena Vasquez from Tesla arrived at Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park in a white Model S, followed by a convoy of technical specialists who had driven overnight from California after learning about the federal investigation that was threatening their acquisition timeline. Jessica watched from her kitchen window as the Tesla team emerged from their vehicles with the purposeful energy of corporate executives who weren't accustomed to having their multi-million-dollar deals interrupted by government bureaucracy. Dr. Vasquez approached Agent Morrison's makeshift command post with the confident stride of someone who'd navigated complex regulatory environments throughout her career. She was a woman in her 40s with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of professional bearing that commanded immediate attention from federal investigators who were more accustomed to intimidating individual inventors than negotiating with Fortune 500 corporate representatives. Agent Morrison, I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, Tesla's Director of Advanced Energy Systems, she announced, presenting business cards and corporate credentials that established her authority to speak on behalf of one of America's most strategically important technology companies. I understand you're conducting a security review of Ms. Chen's innovations, and I wanted to discuss how Tesla's involvement affects your assessment process. Morrison's expression suggested surprise at Tesla's direct intervention in what he'd probably assumed would be a routine technology transfer investigation. Corporate involvement added layers of complexity to federal security reviews, especially when the companies were American firms with their own government contracts and national security clearances. Dr. Vasquez, this is a federal investigation into potential export control violations, Morrison replied, with the measured tone of someone trying to maintain authority while recognizing that the situation had become more complicated. Tesla's commercial interests don't override national security concerns about sensitive technology transfers. But Dr. Vasquez had clearly anticipated this response and came prepared with arguments that reframed the entire investigation in terms that federal agents would find difficult to dismiss. Agent Morrison, Tesla has extensive experience with energy security protocols and export control compliance. We're proposing to incorporate Ms. Chen's innovations into domestic energy infrastructure projects that would strengthen rather than compromise national security. Jessica listened to this exchange from her trailer's small porch, where Emma sat beside her with the patient attention of a child who'd learned to monitor adult conversations for signs of hope or danger. The 6-year-old understood that the Tesla woman was trying to help them, though the technical discussions remained largely incomprehensible. Dr. Vasquez had brought reinforcements in the form of Tesla's government relations specialist, a former Department of Energy official who understood federal security concerns from the inside. David Kim had spent 15 years managing technology transfer protocols before joining Tesla's regulatory affairs team, giving him credibility with investigators who might otherwise dismiss corporate arguments. Agent Morrison, I've reviewed Ms. Chen's published technical specifications, and her innovations represent exactly the kind of domestic energy security capabilities that federal policy is designed to promote, Kim explained, with the insider knowledge of someone who'd helped write relevant regulations. Restricting American companies from accessing these technologies would actually undermine national security objectives. The argument was brilliant in its simplicity. Jessica's innovations strengthened American energy independence, making their Restriction counterproductive to the national security goals that Morrison's investigation was supposedly protecting. Export control regulations were designed to prevent sensitive technologies from reaching foreign competitors, not to prevent American companies from developing domestic energy capabilities. Morrison consulted with his technical specialist, a woman who'd been analyzing Jessica's software algorithms with obvious admiration for their sophistication and effectiveness. Their whispered conversation suggested disagreement within the federal investigation team about whether Jessica's innovations actually represented security threats or strategic opportunities. Dr. Vasquez, even if Tesla's acquisition addresses some security concerns, we still need to complete our assessment of potential export control violations related to Ms. Chen's discussions with foreign companies, Morrison said. Though his tone had lost some of its earlier certainty, this was where Dr. Vasquez revealed the depth of Tesla's commitment to acquiring Jessica's technology and protecting her from federal harassment. Agent Morrison, Tesla is prepared to offer Ms. Chen an exclusive domestic licensing agreement that would prevent any foreign technology transfers while ensuring that her innovations remain under American corporate control. The proposal effectively eliminated the export control concerns that had triggered Morrison's investigation. If Jessica's technology was exclusively licensed to an American company with established security protocols, there would be no possibility of inappropriate foreign transfers. Tesla was offering to solve the federal investigation's central problem while advancing their own commercial interests. Emma had been listening to these negotiations with growing excitement as she realized that the Tesla representatives were defending her mother against the federal agents who'd been asking suspicious questions all morning. "Are the Tesla people going to make the badge men go away?" she whispered to Jessica. "I think they're trying to help us work things out," Jessica replied quietly, though she was amazed by Tesla's willingness to confront federal investigators on behalf of a trailer park inventor they'd never met in person. The technical specialist, who'd been analyzing Jessica's equipment, approached Morrison with findings that appeared to strengthen Tesla's arguments about domestic security benefits. "Agent Morrison, these optimization algorithms could improve grid stability and energy storage efficiency throughout the southwestern United States. Restricting their development would actually harm national energy security." Morrison was clearly struggling with an investigation that had evolved from routine export control enforcement into a complex negotiation involving corporate acquisition teams, national security implications, and media attention that was attracting unwanted scrutiny to his department's heavy-handed tactics. Dr. Vasquez sensed Morrison's uncertainty and pressed her advantage with additional arguments that highlighted the absurdity of treating Jessica's innovations as security threats. "Agent Morrison, Ms. Chen developed these technologies to reduce her family's electric bills while living in a mobile home park. The idea that she's somehow involved in sophisticated foreign espionage operations stretches credibility beyond reasonable limits." The observation struck at the heart of Morrison's investigation's fundamental weakness, the massive disconnect between Jessica's obvious circumstances and the sinister motives that export control violations would require. Single mothers working multiple minimum wage jobs didn't typically operate as international technology transfer agents for foreign governments. Tesla's intervention had attracted additional attention from other companies that had been pursuing Jessica's innovations. Before Morrison's investigation shut down all business development activities, Pacific Solar Solutions arrived with their own legal team, followed by representatives from Renewable Ventures Capital who'd been preparing competitive acquisition offers. The parking area of Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park had been transformed. into an impromptu corporate battlefield where federal investigators, technology companies, and legal specialists negotiated the fate of innovations that had emerged from Jessica's desperate attempt to reduce their monthly electric bill. Mrs. Rodriguez watched these developments from her front porch with the amazement of someone who'd lived in the trailer park for 15 years without ever seeing federal agents and Fortune 500 executives conducting business negotiations beside their community's shared laundry facilities. "Mija, your backyard project has attracted more important people than the park has seen since they built it," Mrs. Rodriguez observed to Jessica during a brief break in the corporate negotiations. Judge Marcus Fleming arrived unexpectedly in his personal vehicle, having been contacted by Dr. Santos at Arizona State University's Technology Transfer Office about the federal investigation that was threatening to derail Jessica's business opportunities. The retired circuit court judge had experience with technology licensing disputes and federal regulatory overreach that gave him authority to challenge Morrison's investigation. "Agent Morrison, I'm Judge Marcus Fleming, and I've been following this situation with considerable concern," Fleming announced as he approached the federal command post. "Could you explain the legal basis for preventing an American citizen from conducting legitimate business activities with domestic corporations?" Morrison's investigation was rapidly acquiring the kind of high-profile attention that federal agents typically preferred to avoid. Corporate executives, retired judges, and university officials were publicly questioning his authority and motives in ways that suggested his department would face difficult questions about heavy-handed tactics against innovative American citizens. "Your Honor, we're conducting a routine security assessment under export control regulations," Morrison replied, though his defensive tone suggested awareness that the investigation was becoming anything but routine. Judge Fleming had clearly researched the relevant laws before arriving at Sunrise Vista. "Agent Morrison, export control regulations require evidence of actual technology transfers to foreign entities. Has Ms. Chen transferred any proprietary information to foreign companies?" The question highlighted the weakness in Morrison's case. Jessica had received inquiries from foreign companies, but hadn't actually shared technical specifications or signed licensing agreements with anyone outside the United States. The investigation was based on potential violations rather than actual security breaches. Dr. Vasquez seized on Fleming's legal challenge to present Tesla's acquisition offer as a solution that would satisfy everyone's concerns while advancing American energy security interests. "Your Honor, Tesla is prepared to execute an immediate exclusive licensing agreement that would place Ms. Chen's innovations under American corporate control while providing her family with appropriate compensation for their value." Emma had been watching these adult negotiations with growing understanding that the Tesla woman was fighting to protect her mother from the federal agents who'd been treating them as suspects. "Mama, I like the Tesla lady better than the badge men," she whispered with the direct honesty that only children possessed. The comment drew smiles from several corporate representatives who'd been observing the federal investigation with growing dismay at Morrison's aggressive tactics against a single mother who'd developed breakthrough technology while trying to pay her electric bills. Tesla's technical team had been conducting their own evaluation of Jessica's solar installation throughout the federal investigation, documenting performance data that exceeded their initial assessments of her innovation's commercial potential. Dr. Vasquez received a steady stream of text messages with efficiency measurements that strengthened Tesla's determination to complete their acquisition despite federal interference. "Agent Morrison, our technical evaluation confirms that Ms. Chen has developed the most efficient residential energy management system ever documented," Dr. Vasquez announced loud enough for everyone present to hear. Tesla is prepared to increase our acquisition offer to $25 million for exclusive domestic licensing rights. The announcement of Tesla's increased offer sent shockwaves through the assembled corporate representatives, several of whom immediately began making phone calls to discuss competitive responses. Jessica felt her knees weaken as she processed numbers that exceeded her wildest imagination about the commercial value of her trailer park innovations. Morrison's investigation team was clearly struggling with a situation that had evolved far beyond their expertise or authority. Federal agents were equipped to handle routine export control violations, not complex negotiations involving corporate acquisition teams, retired judges, and media attention that was attracting scrutiny from Washington oversight committees. Final blow to Morrison's investigation came when Congressman Maria Hernandez arrived with her chief of staff and a photographer from her office's media relations team. The Congresswoman represented Phoenix's 7th District, which included Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park, and had been contacted by constituents concerned about federal harassment of a local inventor. Agent Morrison, I'm Congresswoman Hernandez, and I'd like to understand why federal resources are being used to intimidate American innovators instead of supporting domestic technology development, she announced with the authority of someone who controlled federal agency budgets. Morrison's investigation had suddenly acquired the kind of political attention that ended careers in federal law enforcement. Congressional oversight committees asked hard questions about resource allocation and investigative priorities, especially when agents appeared to be harassing constituents who'd committed no actual crimes. The Congresswoman's arrival effectively ended Morrison's ability to continue his investigation without facing serious political consequences. Tesla's acquisition offer, Judge Fleming's legal challenges, and congressional oversight had created a perfect storm of pressure that made continued federal interference impossible to justify. Within 2 hours of Congresswoman Hernandez's arrival, Morrison announced that his security review had been completed and that no evidence of export control violations had been discovered. Jessica's business development activities could resume immediately, allowing corporate negotiations to proceed without further federal interference. Emma celebrated by running around their small backyard, shouting with joy that the badge men were finally leaving, and the Tesla people could give her mother lots of money for the solar project they'd built together. The intervention that had saved Jessica's opportunities demonstrated how individual innovation could inspire collective action when corporate interests, legal expertise, and political authority aligned to protect American technological achievement from bureaucratic overreach. Tesla's $25 million offer was still on the table, waiting for Jessica's decision about whether to accept exclusive licensing terms that would transform their lives while placing her innovations in the hands of a company committed to advancing domestic energy security. The formal signing ceremony took place 3 weeks later in Tesla's Phoenix offices, a gleaming corporate facility that Jessica had never imagined entering as anything other than a visitor. She sat at a mahogany conference table that probably cost more than her annual income, surrounded by patent attorneys, corporate executives, and technology licensing specialists who'd spent days negotiating the final terms of an agreement that would transform her life beyond recognition. Emma sat beside her in a child-sized chair that Tesla's facilities team had specially arranged, wearing her best dress and clutching a small notebook where she'd been drawing pictures of solar panels and electric cars throughout the lengthy legal proceedings. The 6-year-old had become something of a mascot during the negotiations, her presence reminding everyone involved that this deal would fundamentally change a real family's future rather than merely transferring abstract intellectual property. writes Dr. Elena Vasquez, presided over the ceremony with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully navigated complex corporate negotiations while protecting Tesla's strategic interests. The final licensing agreement represented a compromise that satisfied multiple parties. Jessica retained ownership of her core innovations, while granting Tesla exclusive domestic rights to commercialize her energy management software for residential and commercial applications. Ms. Chen, before we proceed with the formal signing, I want to review the key terms one final time to ensure everyone understands the agreement's implications, Dr. Vasquez said, consulting the bound document that represented months of legal work and corporate negotiation. The licensing deal was structured as a $25 million initial payment, followed by royalty arrangements that could generate additional income for decades as Tesla integrated Jessica's innovations into their expanding energy storage product line. More importantly, the agreement included provisions for continued research and development collaboration, allowing Jessica to work directly with Tesla's engineering teams while maintaining independent inventor status. Jessica's patent attorney, Sarah Mitchell from the firm that Arizona State University had recommended, had spent weeks ensuring that the licensing terms protected Jessica's long-term interests while providing Tesla with the commercial rights they needed to scale her innovations for mass market deployment. The legal fees were being paid from the licensing proceeds, allowing Jessica to access sophisticated representation without depleting her own resources. The agreement grants Tesla exclusive rights to manufacture and distribute energy management systems based on your optimization algorithms throughout North America, Mitchell explained, highlighting key sections with the precision of someone who'd negotiated hundreds of similar deals. You retain rights to international licensing, academic research applications, and any future innovations that extend beyond the current technology scope. Emma had been listening to these legal discussions with the patient attention of a child who'd learned that adult business was important, even when it involved concepts she couldn't fully understand. "Mama, does this mean we can buy the house with the big yard now?" she asked during a brief pause in the contract review. "Yes, sweetheart, we can buy any house you want," Jessica replied, still struggling to believe that her desperate attempt to reduce their electric bill had resulted in financial security that would last for generations. The signing ceremony attracted media attention from technology journalists who'd been following Jessica's story since her original social media posts about DIY solar innovation. Cameras documented the moment when a single mother from a Phoenix trailer park formally licensed breakthrough energy technology to one of America's most valuable companies. Tesla's public relations team had crafted messaging that emphasized the partnership's significance for domestic energy innovation and American technological leadership. Jessica's story represented exactly the kind of grassroots innovation that Tesla wanted to be associated with. Brilliant engineering emerging from real-world necessity rather than corporate research laboratories. This partnership demonstrates Tesla's commitment to supporting American inventors who develop breakthrough technologies that advance our mission of accelerating sustainable energy adoption, Dr. Vasquez told assembled reporters. Ms. Chen's innovations will help millions of families achieve energy independence while strengthening America's position in the global clean energy economy. Judge Marcus Fleming attended the ceremony as Jessica's guest, representing the community support that had helped protect her innovations from federal interference and corporate exploitation. The retired judge had become an advocate for individual inventors facing institutional barriers, using Jessica's case as an example of how proper legal guidance could level the playing field between creative individuals and established corporations. Jessica's success demonstrates what's possible when innovative Americans receive appropriate support for developing breakthrough technologies. Fleming told reporters. Her story should inspire other inventors to pursue their ideas despite financial constraints or institutional skepticism. The most meaningful moment came when Jessica signed the final page of the licensing agreement, officially completing a transaction that would provide Emma with educational opportunities, healthcare security, and financial resources that extended far beyond their immediate needs. The signature represented not just a business deal, but transformation from economic vulnerability to generational wealth. Emma applauded when her mother finished signing, then asked Dr. Vasquez if she could draw pictures of Tesla cars in her notebook. The request prompted laughter from corporate executives who'd spent weeks negotiating complex licensing terms, but found themselves charmed by a 6-year-old's artistic enthusiasm. Mrs. Rodriguez had been invited to witness the ceremony, representing the Sunrise Vista mobile home park community that had supported Jessica's project from its earliest stages. The elderly neighbor wore her best dress and carried herself with the dignity of someone attending a granddaughter's graduation rather than a corporate licensing deal. "Mija, I knew from the beginning that your solar project was special," Mrs. Rodriguez told Jessica during the post-signing reception. "But I never imagined it would bring you this kind of success. Your parents would be so proud." The mention of Jessica's parents triggered unexpected emotion, as she realized that David's death had indirectly led to innovations that could benefit millions of families facing similar energy cost struggles. Her desperate circumstances had forced creative problem-solving that established corporations had somehow overlooked despite their vast research budgets. Tesla's engineering team had already begun integrating Jessica's optimization algorithms into their next-generation Powerwall products, with initial testing showing efficiency improvements that exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The collaboration would continue through Jessica's new role as a Tesla Innovation Fellow, providing her with resources and support for developing additional breakthrough technologies. "Ms. Chen, we'd like to discuss establishing a research facility where you can continue developing energy innovations with Tesla's support," Dr. Vasquez explained during a private conversation after the formal ceremony concluded. "We're thinking about a dedicated laboratory space where you could work with our best engineers while maintaining the creative independence that made your original innovations possible." The proposal represented validation that Jessica's contributions extended beyond her current technology to include her unique approach to problem-solving and innovation. Tesla recognized that her value lay not just in specific algorithms, but in her ability to identify opportunities that conventional engineering approaches missed. Emma's excitement about their new financial security was evident in her constant questions about the house they would buy, and the school she would attend, and the toys they could finally afford without careful budgeting. The 6-year-old's enthusiasm reminded Jessica that their transformation would be measured not just in dollars, but in opportunities and choices that had been impossible before. The drive back to Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park that evening felt surreal as Jessica and Emma returned to their trailer with legal documents proving they were now millionaires. Their modest home looked exactly the same, but everything about their circumstances had changed fundamentally through the corporate partnership that had recognized the commercial value of innovations born from necessity. "Mama, when we move to our new house, can Mrs. Rodriguez come visit us?" Emma asked as they walked up the cinder-block steps to their trailer's front door. "Mrs. Rodriguez can visit us whenever she wants," Jessica promised. "And we'll make sure to find a house close enough that you can still play with your friends from the park." The evening brought a steady stream of neighbors congratulating Jessica on her success and asking questions about how licensing deals worked and whether her innovations might help other families reduce their energy costs. The Sunrise Vista community had watched her project develop from desperate necessity into corporate partnership, providing support and encouragement throughout the process. Jessica spent her first night as a Tesla licensee, sitting at her kitchen table, reviewing the partnership agreement, while Emma slept peacefully in the bunk above. The legal documents represented security and opportunity, but they also carried responsibilities for continuing innovation and technological development that extended far beyond their personal needs. Her laptop displayed dozens of emails from other inventors, single parents, and aspiring entrepreneurs who'd been inspired by her story to pursue their own innovative projects despite financial constraints and institutional barriers. Jessica realized that her success created obligations to support other people facing similar struggles. The most significant email came from Dr. Santos at Arizona State University, proposing the establishment of an innovation fund that would provide resources for inventors who developed breakthrough technologies while facing economic hardship. Jessica's licensing proceeds could seed a program that offered legal support, technical assistance, and business development guidance for creative individuals who lacked access to traditional funding sources. Jessica, your success demonstrates that revolutionary innovations can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, Dr. Santos wrote. We'd like to create a program that helps other inventors navigate the path from breakthrough concept to commercial success, using your experience as a model for supporting grassroots innovation. The proposal appealed to Jessica's engineering background and her memory of the isolation she'd felt while developing her solar project without professional guidance or institutional support. An innovation fund could provide other struggling inventors with resources that might accelerate their success while protecting them from exploitation or federal harassment. Emma woke briefly during the night, asking if their solar panels would still work after they moved to their new house. Jessica assured her that they could build an even better solar system at their new home, with Tesla's support and the latest equipment that their licensing deal would make affordable. Will we still help other people learn about solar power? Emma asked, with the social consciousness that Jessica had tried to instill despite their financial struggles. We'll help even more people than before, Jessica promised. Tesla is going to use our ideas to make solar power available to families all across the country. The conversation reminded Jessica that their partnership with Tesla represented more than personal financial success. Her innovations would be scaled to benefit millions of families facing energy cost challenges, democratizing access to technologies that had previously been available only to wealthy homeowners. The morning would bring house hunting, school district research, and practical decisions about how to manage sudden wealth responsibly. But that night, Jessica fell asleep in their modest trailer, surrounded by the solar equipment that had changed their lives, dreaming about innovations yet to be developed and families yet to be helped through technologies that emerged from necessity and persistence. Her last conscious thought was gratitude for Emma's suggestion months earlier that they ask people for help, an innocent comment that had eventually led to corporate partnerships, congressional intervention, and community support that transformed a desperate single mother's survival strategy into revolutionary technology that would influence America's energy future for decades. Tesla's $25 million licensing payment would begin the next phase of their journey. But Jessica understood that her real achievement lay in proving that breakthrough innovation could emerge from the most challenging circumstances, when creativity, determination, and community support aligned to transform necessity into opportunity. The femme woman who'd been rejected by banks and dismissed by corporate executives had become Tesla's newest innovation partner. with resources and recognition that would allow her to continue developing technologies that served families facing the same energy security challenges that had motivated her original trailer park solar project. 6 months later, Jessica stood in the gleaming laboratory that Tesla had built specifically for her innovations, watching Emma demonstrate their latest creation to a group of visiting congressional representatives. The 8-year-old had become an unofficial spokesperson for family-friendly renewable energy, explaining complex solar optimization concepts with the enthusiasm that only children could muster. "This is our new battery system that learns how families use electricity," Emma announced to the assembled politicians, pointing to equipment that looked far more sophisticated than the salvaged components they'd used in their trailer park. "It talks to all the solar panels and decides when to save power and when to use it, just like Mama taught it to do." Congresswoman Maria Hernandez, who'd intervened during the federal investigation, now served as chairwoman of the House Subcommittee on Energy Innovation. "Ms. Chen, your innovations have already been integrated into over 50,000 Tesla installations across 15 states, she noted, reviewing performance data that showed dramatic improvements in residential energy efficiency. Jessica gestured toward a wall display showing real-time data from Tesla installations that incorporated her optimization algorithms. The numbers were staggering. Millions of kilowatt-hours of energy saved, thousands of families achieving energy independence, and measurable reductions in regional grid stress during peak demand periods. The key insight was that breakthrough innovations often emerge from people facing real-world constraints that force creative problem-solving, Jessica explained to the congressional visitors. Established companies sometimes miss opportunities because they're not experiencing the problems that need solving. The Tesla Innovation Fellowship that Jessica now held had evolved into a broader program supporting inventors who develop technologies while facing economic hardship. Dr. Elena Vasquez presented data showing that the fellowship program had already identified 12 additional inventors whose innovations were being evaluated for potential licensing agreements. The Sunrise Vista Innovation Fund, established with Jessica's licensing proceeds, had become a model for supporting grassroots technological development throughout Arizona and neighboring states. Mrs. Rodriguez, now serving as the fund's community outreach coordinator, had helped identify dozens of inventors whose financial constraints had previously prevented them from pursuing promising innovations. Emma's bedroom in their new house featured walls covered with patents, newspaper articles, and photographs documenting their journey from trailer park desperation to corporate partnership. Tesla's quarterly earnings reports now included Jessica's innovations as a key driver of their residential energy division's growth, with analysts projecting that her optimization algorithms would contribute over $1 billion in revenue during the next 5 years. But Jessica's proudest achievement was the letter from a single mother in rural Nevada whose electric bill had been reduced by 80% through a Tesla installation that incorporated the software Jessica had developed while trying to survive in Sunrise Vista Mobile Home Park. Innovation doesn't require fancy laboratories or unlimited budgets, Jessica told the congressional delegation as their visit concluded. It requires people who refuse to accept that problems can't be solved, even when conventional solutions aren't working. The single mother who'd been rejected by banks and dismissed by federal investigators had proven that revolutionary technologies could emerge from trailer parks as easily as from Silicon Valley research centers, inspiring a new generation of inventors to pursue breakthrough solutions, regardless of their circumstances. What incredible story of transformation have you witnessed in your own community? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things through determination and creativity. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads.